Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Give me a mountain with lots to do. Give me the sunshine, give me a dew. Give me something simple and true. All I need is sunshine and a cool, refreshing mountain dew. So give me my good friends, give me a dew.
Grab some friends and an ice-cold Mountain Dew today.
Mountain Dew.
Hello, and welcome to the Psych Legal Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm the therapist, Tess Brigham.
And I'm Brooke Brigham. I'm the attorney.
And today we are discussing the life and murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. It's a 4-part documentary on Lifetime. And Brooke, you have a synopsis.
Yes, I think most people
have heard of this case.
Although it's been 30 years, and that's why, this is coming back around.
Oh, did you know that I noticed this, that as people are listening to this on July 11th, that she died. At first I thought it was July, but it's actually June 12th, 1994. I was like, wow, 30 years.
Yeah.
I mean...
And then also coincidentally, OJ Simpson just died April 10th, 2024. So obviously this documentary was in the works before that, but it has been 30 years. And I have to say, I followed this case pretty closely and I'd forgotten a lot of things. And there were a lot of things that just I didn't know had never come out that are just now coming out, because this narrative is from the family and friends who really knew her and know what happened to her. Whereas the media presentation was the media's narrative, and which are two different things. So anyway, the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson occurred on June 12th, 1994 in the Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Nicole Brown Simpson, the ex-wife of OJ Simpson, and her friend Ronald Goldman were found stabbed to death outside Nicole's condominium. The investigation and subsequent trial became one of the most publicized and controversial criminal cases in American history. OJ Simpson, a former NFL star and actor, was arrested and charged with the murders. The case garnered intense media scrutiny, focusing on Simpson's celebrity status, allegations of domestic violence in his relationship with Nicole, and the racial dynamics surrounding the trial. The prosecution argued that Simpson had a history of abusing Nicole and presented circumstantial evidence linking him to the murders. The defense countered with claims of police misconduct and planted evidence, questioning the integrity of the investigation. In October 1995, after a lengthy and widely televised trial, O.J. Simpson was acquitted of all criminal charges. The verdict sparked nationwide debates about race, justice, and the effectiveness of the legal system. The murder of Nicole Brown Simpson remains a tragic and contentious chapter in American legal history, raising awareness about domestic violence and underscoring the complexity of celebrity trials. The documentary provides a comprehensive look into the life, relationships, and tragic death of Nicole Brown Simpson. It delves into her background, highlighting her marriage to O.J. Simpson and the subsequent challenges she faced, including allegations of domestic violence. The documentary explores the events leading up to Nicole's murder in June of 1994, examining the complex dynamics of her relationship with O.J. Simpson, and the impact of fame and public scrutiny on their personal lives. It discusses the investigation into her death and the subsequent trial, which became one of the most famous and controversial cases in American legal history. Through interviews with friends, family members, and legal experts, the documentary seeks to shed light on her personality and the enduring legacy of her tragic death. It also addresses broader issues such as domestic violence, celebrity culture, and the media's role in high-profile criminal cases. Now this is getting a little redundant. Okay, we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So,
all right. So those are the broad strokes of the case trial of the century.
Make sure we know exactly what we're talking about.
Yes. So we're going to go over some of the major themes of the documentary. I mean, the documentary is chronological. They show us, what Nicole was like as a kid. And then one thing I was kind of upset about is it felt like it had to detour many times to kind of stop and talk about OJ. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, oh, this is about Nicole, yet he gets, that's what looms so much in her life. And
I think they were trying to kind of do this parallel thing of, okay, here's Nicole's life, and here's what OJ was doing at the time. Because, they were, when they met, she was 18, he's 30. So he's 12 years older than her. So I kind of thought it was setting up like where they were in their lives when they met.
Yeah. I mean, that could be it. I don't know. They were giving us some context. It's just a little bit of what I was thinking. I was like, oh, wow, we have to like stop and go back to him and talk about him. And I get it. It's part of the documentary. But just about how much he looms in her life. And so much of her life is defined by him. But, so the first thing we wanted to talk about is domestic violence.
Well, let's, it was interesting that Denise Brown, it's narrated a lot by her sister Denise, they were very close in age and very close. And Denise spent a lot of time with Nicole and OJ and observed a lot of stuff. And she was talking about so Nicole was working as a hostess at this restaurant in Los Angeles, and OJ came in, and at the time he was still married to his first wife, Marguerite. And he's just smitten with her right away and asked her to go out with him. And Denise says how on their first date, he ripped her pants off of her.
Yeah.
Like literally ripped them jeans, like ripped them open. And Denise is like, what the hell? And Nicole was just, she didn't care. She was in love with him.
Yeah.
First date.
That was really surprising because I think that, like when you watch these documentaries, right, we all kind of put ourselves in the shoes of the person of like, what would I do? Or how would I handle this? Or, how would I have taken that in? And, and I'm not here to blame Nicole at all, but you do kind of wonder, you're like, wait a second, this wasn't something he wasn't charming you for 6 months or a year. And then all of a sudden this new violent person emerged. It's like, this is who you were on day one. And you were that smitten with him, after that one date with him.
That didn't bother her.
Yeah. And I think that, but if you take a step back and look at it, you look at this sort of perfect storm of she's 18 years old. Her brain hasn't fully formed. She's just like, this is her first job in life. She had just moved out of her parents' house. I mean, she was 18, she had her whole life ahead of her and she didn't have a ton of life experience. So you can see how easy it would be then to meet this man, get so swept up in it. So all of that and decide, and just be like, oh, he must have charmed her after he ripped her pants. Well, like I think he was very good at the cycle of like, oh, I'm so sorry. That will never happen again. Oh, I'm sorry. You're so beautiful. I just couldn't help myself.
Yeah. He did it, I'm sure, in a way of like, oh, you're so beautiful. I just, want to devour you. And you just got a little carried away. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it didn't scare her.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time he's still married and, living in the house in Rockingham. with Marguerite, who never accused him of domestic violence. But in this documentary, we see there were LAPD who testify about being called to that house by Marguerite. And it happened more than once. And Marguerite's sister was in the documentary. Did the sister confirm domestic violence? She was kind of cagey.
She didn't want to. She basically said, well, I want to let my sister confirm. That's for her to say. But the documentary, I mean, you do see this LA policeman come out and he talks about being called to the house and what he observes. So I don't think she's ever on record confirmed it, but I think it's a fair assumption.
Well, and in fact, they had a younger child who drowned in the swimming pool at Rockingham.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
When she was 2 years old. And apparently OJ blamed Marguerite for it and went to the hospital. They were in the hospital because the child lived a few days, I think, and then died. But there were reports that he attacked Marguerite in the hospital, like lunged at her.
Wow.
Lashed out at her. So.
Yeah. And that's the other part of it too, right? Is why did, yes, OJ, Nicole's a beautiful woman, but OJ also was enamored with her because she was enamored with him. Right. Like if he was not this, he was a 30-year-old married man with a couple kids. So who are you, you would think that of course you're going to be, not the fact that he would pick someone who was so young, so naive, so, doesn't have a lot of power, doesn't have any money, doesn't have anything, right? That he really, he liked her because she sort of was exactly who he knew he could control.
Yeah.
From day one.
No, definitely. So shortly thereafter, he kicked Marguerite out and moved Nicole in.
Yeah.
And also kicked his 2 children out.
Yeah.
Let's not forget. And so,
he was very violent. I mean, I don't know what he was like but the oldest son, what's his name? Jason? Yeah. I mean, there was a story in the documentary about how he was very violent with Jason.
Yeah. He really beat him up.
Yeah. Would beat him up. And I don't know about the other children, but there's a tremendous amount of violence in the house. Yeah.
Yeah. And the police were called to the house many times. So OJ and Nicole then dated for 7 years before they got married. And it sounded like a just exhausting,
yes,
an exhausting process of, infidelities and domestic violence, and just manipulation and control. And she got sick of it, and I think she finally moved out of Rockingham. And then the next day, he proposed to her.
Yes,
and promised to get baptized, which seemed to appease her.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's right. Like OJ I think that's the charm of OJ. I think that's he knows when he's pushed things too far and what he needs to do to get right back in there. And we saw some of the letters. We saw some of the letters that he would write to her, apologizing, and you could just see very clearly how this cycle just went on and on and on. And the longer she's, and that's the whole thing about people don't quite understand about domestic violence is that with Nicole, even though they had lots of money, it wasn't in her name,
right?
And she, so she really had nowhere else to go or anywhere to live. And then if you have this person that you're, saying, I love this person, I love this person, I love this person, it's very shameful for people to go back home and to then tell their family, like, this is what's been going on with me. This is what's happening with me. And that's another reason why people have a hard time leaving.
I think the financial, I think especially in this case, the financial control was very intense, especially towards the end when she was trying to leave.
Yeah.
And I think also her family too, I believe that OJ arranged for Nicole's father to get a Hertz franchise.
Mm.
You know, because he was a Hertz spokesman, and you know, I think he helped. Having OJ Simpson in your family was helpful.
Yeah,
you know, he was very connected. Everyone in LA loved him. Mm-hmm. He really was like the darling of not just LA, but the country. And that's the thing that was so hard. We were talking about this before we started. When this case happened, everyone was like, what? OJ?
No.
We all love OJ. He's so funny in those movies, and he's so charming, and, you know, running through the airport. And so that's the OJ we knew. And apparently the only people who knew he was violent were the LAPD kept getting called to his house for various wives and never did anything about it.
Yeah.
Everyone else thought he was great.
Well, and we learned that he had friends in the police department.
Oh, right? Yeah, lots of friends.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, this is just par for the course. Yeah.
That's why it was so shocking to the country. Like, literally. Yeah. Very hard to wrap your brain around that this person who we thought we knew is just a murderer.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the part that's hard, right? Is that, and I think maybe what we experienced is what Nicole on some level had been experiencing, this back and forth of being loved and charmed and, you know, and showered with love and gifts and attention and just the charm of all of that. And then you're back, but then you're going to do all these awful things over here. How can that be? Mm-hmm. And I think I'm not Nicole, but I would also think, in my opinion, that that's also what's going on in Nicole's mind. Like how he's so great in all these ways, you know, this other part of him must not be, must not be real. And I think that's the other part too of what happens for people is, you know, when you get someone who is constantly on you, criticizing you, because it sounds like he was very critical, right? She had to stay thin. Mm-hmm. He called, remember, she got pregnant. And he called her fat and called her a fat pig. So she was so, conditioned for many years of like, okay, if I just do these things well and perfect, then he will be okay and life will be okay. And then, you know, when she does something that's, you know, innocuous or anything, and he then comes along and the abuse starts over again, I think then it's very easy for her to get into this headspace of, oh, you know, this is my, you know, maybe I did do something wrong. Maybe this is my fault. I mean, it's like a slow, you know, it's such a slow burn over time, but we forget that how, even though from the outside, Nicole looked like this beautiful woman that had it all, I think that he just destroyed her sense of self and who she was and how she felt about herself.
Name calling, yelling and degrading and all of it. And also, and he's yelling he's a very big man. He's very, you know, it's very intimidating. So,
also too, one of the narratives that came up in terms of domestic violence. So when all of the news started coming up about all of these phone calls and the bruises and all this stuff, did you remember and they had like a OJ friend, or she was a friend of the family, and then she kind of turned on the Browns, who the new narrative that was being placed by his defense team was that Nicole and OJ, you know, they were, you know, rough with both of each other. They both gave it to each other. They were
mutually combative.
Mutually combative. Yeah. That's what it was. And I think that's the other part of it too, which is then that becomes the narrative too of like, well, what is she doing? You know, what is she really doing to like spur him on to do these things? Like,
what was that so-called friend, Cora Fishman?
Yeah.
She went and wrote a book talking about how, well, Nicole was violent too.
Yeah.
Like, please, you know, but it started showing up, you know, more and more. So she has Sydney, and then she has Justin, like within a couple of years. So then Denise talks about and that was a whole nother level of, okay, so now she's got children with him.
Yes.
Okay, now she's even more financially dependent on him. And, you know, she wants to keep her family together. She wants to, you know, she wants her kids to have a father around. So the whole family, including, you know, her parents, her sisters, OJ, probably Al Cowlings, who else, go to Hawaii for the holidays. And things are sort of, I guess, going okay. And then they were in a restaurant. This is the weirdest story. And there was this man who he was just really thought that just little baby Justin was so cute. And I guess Nicole let him hold the baby or something. And he kissed the baby on the forehead.
Well, it was a gay couple.
Yeah.
It was a gay
couple.
couple.
It was a gay couple.
Yeah.
And so then afterwards, OJ said, why did you let that gay guy kiss my son? That's disgusting, whatever. And then she says, well, I don't know why you have a problem with it. Your father is gay.
Mm-hmm. Which I had never heard before. I didn't know.
Yeah,
is that a known?
That.
Oh, okay.
I'd heard that before. And in fact, they said he was not only was he gay, he was a well-known drag queen.
Yeah.
Francisco.
Yeah.
He died of AIDS, like in the 80s.
Oh, did he die of? I didn't know that. He died at 66. I'm like, God, that's really young. Like, what happened? But okay.
Yeah, because they divorced. OJ's mother went on, and I think she got married at least once or twice after that. And so that just set him off.
Mm-hmm.
And he beat the hell out of her that night. And it's in her diaries.
Mm-hmm.
She describes the whole incident in the restaurant and with the couple and everything. She describes it all. And then she comes down the next day and they're in Hawaii. It's hot and she's wearing a long sleeve shirt. And Denise is like, what's going on? What's wrong? He'd completely beaten her in the hotel room, which I presume their children were in there.
Yeah, or in another room, or maybe they had a nanny. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, those kids, as we learned, those kids knew a hell of a lot of what was going on. They knew.
I don't know how those kids are not just like,
I don't know,
in an institution. And
I don't know.
The son, Justin, he's actually a successful realtor in Florida.
I'm glad. I'm very happy. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Very happy for him.
He just recently had a child, and then the daughter Sydney also had a child.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sure what she does for work. I think I heard she was working with her brother. But how they got out of that whole thing intact is a freaking miracle.
Yeah, it is. It is a miracle.
So anyway, so this goes on. So the violence kind of culminates on New Year's Eve. In the late night hours of January 1st, 1989, there's a huge fight at Rockingham, and the police are called. And I can't remember if this was the one time the police actually made a report. Of all the times the police were called to anywhere, there was one time that a report was made, and I think it might have been this time.
Yeah.
Because he beat her up so badly. And when the police got there, she was in such a bad state. But of course, he ended up like going and quietly pleading no contest, getting no jail time.
So explain how you were explaining to me earlier about how it works with domestic violence and people being right, because it's not so simple as whether or not someone presses charges or not.
Right. So like traditionally, that's how men get away with this stuff, because the women won't, quote unquote, press charges. But it's not up to the witness as to whether or not they want to press charges. The state can go ahead and prosecute you. You don't need the permission of the witness, but obviously it's a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
It's much harder if you don't have a cooperative witness who's the victim. Or you don't have any other witnesses to the incident. That's your only witness, and they're not being cooperative. Then obviously it's really hard to make a case, but maybe not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's video of it. Maybe there's other witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not the woman wants the man prosecuted, or vice versa, or if it's a same-sex couple, whatever the situation is, it's not the be-all and end-all. And in fact, after this case in California, they strengthened the laws to make it harder for men to get away with this.
Mm-hmm.
And also, too, now, like, the police are mandated, if they get a domestic violence call and they get there and they find that it's credible, that they have to arrest someone.
Mm-hmm.
They can't just be like, okay, well, everything's fine now. No one wants to press charges, see you later. They can't do that anymore.
Well, I think I falsely, probably like a lot of people, assume that's why OJ was never ever got in trouble for all of the domestic violence that happened before, was that because first Marguerite and now Nicole, they were too scared to press charges. And I also want to say, when just going really very quickly, going back to this whole thing about Nicole and OJ, like they were combative with each other, you know, OJ was what, 200 pounds?
Over
Huge.
200 pounds.
Like I was
6'2" or something.
And Nicole was in good shape, but I don't care. Nicole was never going to be able to be stronger than him.
She was like 110 pounds or
or
something.
he kept them, and that's right. He kept them small. He wanted them to be teeny tiny small so he could control them. But anyway, sorry. But I had that same idea that, it's because couldn't get Nicole or Marguerite to testify. But that what you're saying, though, is there were many, many times, because it sounds like the police were called out there many times. There were many, many times that police officers could have been writing reports. And it sounds like what they were doing was just going out there going, oh, it's OJ.
Yeah.
Okay, bye. See ya.
Exactly.
And then like just leaving and no one, like they finally wrote a report.
Well,
I didn't realize that's what was happening.
I think they may have written reports, but they basically just said, like you said, well, we responded, everything's fine, whatever. But this New Year's Eve one was undeniable because she was badly beaten and the police couldn't ignore it. And now she had Denise come over and take pictures of her. Those are like the pictures that you've seen in the media and throughout the trial. And so it just got to the point where they had to do something. But even then, he didn't get punished. So that's 89. And so things kind of keep going. But, again, this pattern of the police doing nothing, this pattern of he's telling her multiple times that he's going to kill her.
Oh, yes.
Multiple times.
Yes.
And she multiple times also, she tells the police and her friends, anyone who will listen, that someday he's going to kill me. And it was just so sad that I'm just watching all this and I'm like, it's not like she didn't have people in her life who loved her and cared about her. And the police certainly should care about you. At a certain point, I don't care if OJ donates to all these police fundraisers and does this and that for the police and, makes them feel good. At a certain point, do you have a conscience? Do these police officers have a conscience?
No. I mean, I think some do. And I think that I think the ones that maybe, that do maybe write the reports and try to get some stuff done and try to push it through. But I mean, if you have the right friends, I think it sounds like it's very easy for things to get squashed or for people to convince you, like, what are you doing? No one's going to convict OJ. And like, what do you mean? Like, that's crazy. And, oh, come on. What do you think was happening? I mean, I will say that, just seeing, obviously, Denise has become a huge advocate for domestic violence, which I believe is probably how she manages to channel her anger and her grief. But Nicole, this case did change a lot of things. And I think that, the one thing that we all know so much more about, and we're talking a lot more about, is domestic violence because I think that Denise had, it was so interesting to hear, like, everyone had a different opinion of what she should be doing. Denise came at it from this place of like, what are you doing? Why are you staying with him? Like, you should just get up and go, which isn't the right way to treat it. Then you've got her mom, Judy, she was very much in this place of like, keep your family together. You have to do whatever you can to keep your family together. And then you've got, these other people that are, telling you something else that you should be feeling. No one was, there were very few people in her life that I think were showing up for her the way in which she needed them to show up and getting her the help that she needed, because we just didn't know. I just don't think people knew enough. Yeah.
And also you have to remember too, that during this time, it wasn't all bad. It's never all bad because they were, they had a lot of friends, like, they were friends with, Robert Kardashian and Kris Jenner, Kris Kardashian. they partied with them. They partied with a lot of different couples.
Yeah, Rockingham was the place.
Yeah, it was, and they did a lot together. They vacationed. They were having fun. So there were these fun times, and so it was like there was this group of people who knew them as just the fun couple.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think Kris Kardashian knew. They interviewed her, and she didn't seem to know much about what was happening behind the scenes, even though Robert and OJ were very, very close friends.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. At least she didn't say anything.
I don't think anybody knew the extent of how bad it was. I don't think anybody did.
Maybe Faye Resnick.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but I really think that again, this is the other part of it too, is because we are so negative towards the victims, because we are like, well, why would you put up with that? And what's wrong with
If
you?
he's doing that, why don't you leave? If you don't leave, then it must be okay.
Or there must be something inherently wrong with me. If I'm not leaving, I'm staying with this abuse, then there's something wrong with me, and therefore I am bad and something needs to change inside of me, which is basically what your abuser has been telling you all along, right? It kind of this self-fulfilling prophecy. Yeah, essentially. And we were talking about this earlier about Denise, and that she said that she learned that wasn't the right thing to say to somebody in this kind of situation, which is like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you just leave him?
Mm-hmm.
Because that then makes it right. I don't know.
Yeah, she said that. Yeah, she said that she learned. She was on The View. I watched this interview of the sisters on The View, and she said that because that was always her response. Why are you with him? Why are you putting up with this? Why don't you leave him? And I'm sure that was everybody else's response that knew.
Yeah.
And she said she learned that that's not the right thing to do, because, like you said, it kind of builds like these barriers. Automatically these defenses go up, and automatically you think, well, what is wrong with me? Why am I not leaving? And then, you're supposed to offer support. You're supposed to say, I would love you. I care about you. How can I help you? Let them know I will help you get out of this situation. There are resources for you. And it's true. This case did change the law in California dramatically. Mm-hmm. It gave a lot more funding to, be able to prosecute domestic violence cases. The domestic violence hotline, which began in California, has received, something like 7 million calls to date. And just awareness and all. It's done a lot of good. And Denise Brown has done a lot of good. And remember, there was one part in here where the Violence Against Women Act, which was originally passed in 1993, it was up for reauthorization. I think it was the year 2000. And they were having a hard time passing it. They needed help getting the reauthorization. So Joe Biden's office calls, because he at the time was a senator and head of the Judiciary Committee. And she went to Washington, D.C. and testified and helped to get that through. So it's made a difference on state level, federal level. But it still needs more.
Yeah.
More needs to be done.
Well, and also, it's so interesting because did you watch The Jinx?
No.
Yeah. I mean, the Bob from The Jinx, what's so interesting is he did a lot of the same things that OJ did, which is charming the family. And because I was just looking through. So Marguerite's sister, it's so funny because the one that would not talk about Marguerite and the domestic violence, that she says that she feels like OJ is like a brother to her. Like, he really gaslit and groomed everybody. Sorry.
No, he was a pro at it. He was. So finally, in 1992, she actually leaves him. And so she finds a condo or something to rent in Brentwood on Gretna Green, and he is just stalking her. Yeah. He is hiding in the bushes outside her house, looking in the window. He's, following her, spying on her. He's constantly showing up there. She's constantly calling the police. One night he comes in, he literally broke the door down because he had seen Nicole inside with like a boyfriend or something, being intimate. And there's a 911 call where you hear him yelling at her, and she's like, "Can you please send someone to Gretna Green? He's back."
Yeah.
And they're like asking for a description, and she's like, "It's OJ Simpson. You know who he is." I mean, she's called them so many times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when Kalen, who was, I forget, he was a friend of a friend or someone, he needed a place to stay, and she needed rent money because she's on her own now. And so he moves into her little guest house there, and he's interviewed, and he corroborates all this.
Yeah.
And he talks about how that night when OJ broke in, they had to go and board up the door in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And again, he's doing this while his kids are home.
Yeah. No, he doesn't care.
Upstairs.
I mean, OJ doesn't care about his kids. I'm sorry. He's never. I mean, and we see this later on, how much he does not care about how little he thinks about other people besides himself.
Yeah. So she finally gets some money. The divorce is final. She buys that condo on Bundy. And again, he's still coming around, stalking her at Bundy.
Well, and also driving by, like she'd be at a restaurant, like eating with friends, and here his car would go by. And that's one of the things this documentary, which I never really got, because I think in my mind, I knew that they had been married and had been married for a while, OJ and Nicole, but I don't think I ever really understood how that I, in my mind, thought the two of them had been, that divorced and separated and not in each other's lives, that barely at all, just for the kids, for the last couple years. And what we really learn in this documentary is Nicole was being just tortured up until the very end. This woman never had a moment of peace. From 18 years old until her death, this woman was constantly being harassed by him. So they talk about, this time of her having this independence and all of this. But really, when you think about it, it was like, God, it must have been a couple months here, there, a couple months over here, a couple months over here. But it wasn't years of being independent on her own. It really was these little teeny tiny pockets of her getting enough strength, and then something happening.
He never stopped following her.
No.
In fact, at one point, shortly before he killed her, I don't know if this is like 93, 94, she basically said, "He's never going to leave me alone. I might as well just, get back with him." But she's still living in her condo. But for the sake of her kids and to try to have some peace, so he's not like constantly stalking her, she agrees to kind of be with him. They spend the holidays together. But nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. And there was some speculation. I don't know where I heard this, that maybe because towards the end of her life, those last couple of months, she may have been seeing Marcus Allen again, because she had that affair with Marcus Allen that also really pissed him off. I can't remember if we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that. And one of the comments, I can't remember who made it, about that people thought it was kind of interesting, that why would you go after his friend, this friend and competitor of his, and that, was Nicole, did Nicole do that as a way of like poking the bear? But I wondered if it was more about Nicole feeling like I need a protector, or I need right? Like someone, okay, here, maybe this person will protect me. And maybe Marcus can get OJ to get away from me,
No, that just enraged OJ, because Marcus was kind of like the younger, faster version of OJ. And she wrote in her diary, she says, "When I'm with Marcus, he makes me feel so, smart and sexy and good. And when I'm with OJ, he makes me feel none of those things." I mean, God, she was just looking for just some crumb of something. And I don't know, who knows, maybe in the days leading up to the murder, maybe when he was stalking her, he might have seen Marcus's car over there, or Marcus coming or going from Bundy. I don't know, but so and in fact, she called for help 5 days before the murder. Called the police. So I mean, this is up until the very, very, very end. He just I don't even know how to describe it. But
well, yeah. Well, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, I just want to kind of interweave this in here. So I just discovered this great podcast that it's called Pop Crime with Kiki Monique. And she had Harvey Levin on, who he just did a documentary about this because of the anniversary and whatnot. So Harvey Levin became famous. He's the TMZ head of TMZ. He was a lawyer. He's a reporter. He was a legal analyst. He covered the OJ case. He's been covering OJ for forever. But he has this theory that, like, about a month before the murders, apparently OJ had gone over to her house and slashed her tires on her car because she had this Ferrari, and she was seen driving around
late for a date.
Yeah, driving around with these guys in the Ferrari. So he went and he slashed her tires so she couldn't drive the car.
Of course.
And Harvey Levin also said that OJ knew about Ron Goldman, that he had seen Goldman and Nicole at the Starbucks in Brentwood, and literally pulled up and summoned Nicole to come over to the car and yelled at her about being with Goldman. And so he thinks that, that night after the recital and the dinner at Mezzaluna, and how OJ was rebuked, and, no one wanted to sit next to him, and nobody wanted to talk to him.
And he was not invited to dinner. No, he was not.
No.
And he was very upset about that.
Yes. While they're having dinner, he's driving by the restaurant back and forth on San Vicente.
God.
I mean, this is reaching like crazy.
And you know what? The more we talk about this, and the more you're kind of like, Brentwood is a small community.
Yeah,
it really
small.
is. It's a tiny little community. And excuse me. And the fact that this seemed to be this known secret, this known thing that, there must be reports constantly of this. There's a man in the bushes. There's this guy's driving around. He's yelling at people at Starbucks. It's kind of like none of this is going anywhere. She really was alone.
Psych Legal Pop will be right back after these messages.
Hello, this is Tess Brigham, one half of the podcast Psych Legal Pop. When I'm not podcasting with my sister and analyzing pop culture, I'm a speaker who talks about mental health in the workplace. In today's post-pandemic hybrid working world, mental health matters more than ever. I specialize in empowering organizations to retain their valuable employees. I understand the unique challenges facing young adults in today's world, and I'm here to bridge the gap. So head over to my website, www.tessbrigham.com, to learn more about my speaking services and how I can help your organization reach new heights of success. Let's revolutionize your organization's approach to mental health and employee retention. Visit www.tessbrigham.com to explore how we can collaborate.
Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
There was no one
was protecting her.
Except for Ron Goldman.
Well,
no
but
one.
so this is Levin's theory, okay? he says that OJ was all pumped up, went over there, is stalking her, looking in the window, and he apparently you could see her bathroom. She had like all these candles around the bathtub, and he looks inside and he sees her, and she looks like she's waiting for someone to come over, and then he thinks that all of a sudden, in walks Ron Goldman into the courtyard because there's like a gate where you're on the sidewalk and there's a gate. You go through a gate and then you go downstairs into a little courtyard, and then you go up some stairs into the condo. And so he's lurking around, by the front window. Goldman comes in and he's got this knife because he says he thinks he went there to slash the tires again.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And we learned, I didn't know this. Did you know that OJ was really into knives? That OJ loved knives? I was just like, oh, great. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, of course he does.
I can believe it.
Yeah. No, it doesn't surprise me. I'm like, oh, but it just, the more and more that comes out, you're just like, oh God. Okay.
Yeah. So in walks
interesting
Ron Goldman into the courtyard. And of course, OJ recognizes him. He knows who he is, and he just goes off.
Yeah.
Stabs him to death. And then Nicole hears this commotion and she comes outside, and then he kills her because the prosecution always had this theory that he killed her first.
Yeah, that's what I was reading about that.
Yeah, that Goldman happened upon this and, tried to save her or whatever. But I don't know. I think this makes a lot more sense to me. I don't know. It's an interesting podcast. If anyone's interested, go listen to it. It's from June 26th.
So I thought that one of the reasons why they thought that Nicole was killed first was that Nicole did not have any blood on her shoes, as if there was a scuffle and he cuts her and she's down, versus Ron Goldman, whose shoes were bloody, and he obviously had a lot of defensive wounds, and that maybe he was in the middle of doing something with Nicole, or it just happened, and then he walked up. Because you hear someone saying, "Hey, what's going on here?"
Where do you hear that?
I always thought that was a known thing, that someone that a neighbor overheard a man saying, Hey, what's going on here? But it's the bottom of the shoes that was, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
But Ron's body was found like kind of off to the side of the porch, like where there's a little grassy area. And her body, she didn't have any shoes on. She was barefoot. Her body was on the stairs, or it probably would fall into the bottom. So she didn't make it over to the area where Goldman was killed to even get any blood on her. I don't know. It's also...
It is interesting because crazy. If you think about it that way, that if he's there with a knife, he wants to slash the tires again. He sees Ron. That sets him off. He stabs Ron. Nicole comes out, and it's kind of like, okay, now I got to kill her too. Like I'm in.
Well, he clearly had impulses to kill her for
years. He'd been wanting to do this.
He's been wanting to do this. He's carrying around knives. What are you doing coming to someone's house with a big old knife? I mean, and I don't know. It's we'll never know for sure, but I mean, how it happened. But he told us. He told her. He told everybody many times that he was going to kill her. So
yes,
he did. So I don't know what else to say about. I mean, it's a horrible, horrific crime, and also domestic violence. Like, this is another fact that has come to be more well known, is that the most dangerous time for a woman is when she's leaving a man.
Yes,
and that day she did the ultimate. She did some things to OJ that day that had never happened before. Like, the sister Dominique was talking about how normally OJ would come with the family. They would all come together. They did not come together. She left his ticket at will call. They would all sit together. They didn't sit together. He's sitting over in the corner. Like, no one was talking to him.
Yeah.
Everyone was kind of ignoring him. Yeah. And then he didn't get invited to the dinner. And it was kind of like, all these years, he had always kind of kept like one foot in, no matter how bad things were.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think he lost it.
Yeah. His power, he was losing his power. He was losing his control. Because all of this is about control.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being able to control another person. And so, right, because I'm just looking at my notes. So according to the documentary, it was May 22nd, 1994 that they formally split. And then June 6th, Nicole gets this letter from OJ about unpaid taxes. And that sets her off. And I think I think there was something about that. Like, you got to be goddamn kidding me that you're like, we're splitting up and this happens. And and I think he maybe thought that the unpaid taxes would get her to like soften, but it got her to be harder. And and then she put her foot down and he couldn't handle it. He could not handle that. Oh my God, you guys are moving on. You're building a life. You're moving on without me. And it is interesting, right? Like how, in some ways, it sounds like with Marguerite, he was able to move on to somebody else, but he was never able to move on from Nicole.
Nicole, I think, just represented everything that like he had always wanted, but could never have. But now that he was so rich and so famous, like he could have this young, perfect, blonde California girl who was just obviously thought he was great.
So it was almost kind of like with Marguerite, because he left Marguerite. So it was like his choice. Like, I don't want that anymore. I'm going to go with this person. But I guess I wonder, because they talk about he carried on an affair with Tawny Katane apparently for years, and that his cheating, that he cheated on her when she was giving birth to their child, Justin, apparently, that he was constantly cheating on her. And it's kind of interesting. Like, you were able to move on from Marguerite, to Nicole. So you could not, like, there was no one else to go next to that. Nicole it was just, I guess I wonder if someone else came along, would he have just dropped Nicole and focused on something else?
I don't think so, because there were other women out there who would be happy to be with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was something about her. I don't know. I think
her saying no. Maybe Marguerite never said no. Maybe Marguerite until the, never ever didn't, and that it was, no, you can't come to dinner. No, you can't sit with us. No, you can't do this. And maybe there was something really firm. One of the other topics we haven't talked about is racism.
Yes, that was equally as big of a factor in this case.
Because depending on your age, depending on if you were around in the 90s, that it was 1991 when the Rodney King video came out?
Yeah. And I think the trial was 92.
Yes. And I remember, because 92, it was around the summertime when the verdict came out, and they acquitted the cops.
So just to fill people in, in case you're younger. So Rodney King was a man who, there was a videotape that came out that showed, 10, 12 LAPD officers beating him on the street after stopping him for a traffic stop. And he was high on some drugs. He was not in a good place, but they couldn't manage to just arrest him.
Yes.
They couldn't just get some handcuffs on him and arrest him. They beat him for, I don't know how many minutes, but there was videotape of it, which back then was a big deal.
Yes.
Because you had to have a camcorder, one of those big camcorders. There were no iPhones, or, you couldn't just whip out a phone. So it was a very big deal. And they had to move the trial to Silicon Valley, Simi Valley, north of Los Angeles. They did a change of venue, but all the cops were acquitted anyway.
And it was very, very clear that they were not, whatever their excuse was, that if he was high on something, what they were beating him. They weren't like trying to grab his arms and get him behind his back and like kind of like, hey, let's bear hug the guy and get him to, make sure he doesn't have weapons. They were just beating him
with batons and kicking him. And
I think that for Black people, it was like, see, God damn it, see.
But even with the videotape, it
wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, and so people lost their shit, like justifiably so. And so then there were riots in the area of Compton and Inglewood, these predominantly Black neighborhoods, for, I don't know, days. How many? Very violent riots, fires. This man, famously, this white man who was driving a truck through Compton or one of those communities, it was the wrong place at the wrong time, and he got dragged out of his truck, and he was beaten very severely. Can't remember his name,
but he's come back. Or, you know, he was very much in this place of like, I forgive what happened. I you know, he was very forgiving and understanding.
Yeah. So that was, the racial tensions were super high.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of racial tension just in general. And like remember the Black community and the Korean community, there were some riots over tensions there. It was just, and then there was the whole police, the LAPD for years had just been a really corrupt institution. And Daryl Gates, the chief of police, was very corrupt, and it just wasn't good. So, so then this case happens just a few years later, and one of the lead detectives in the case, the guy who found the bloody glove, Mark Furman, turned out that he wrote a screenplay or something, and he did an interview about this screenplay he was writing, and he used the N-word during his interview about 57 times.
Oh my God, that many times during the interview?
I said about. I'm
that's a lot. I thought he only said it once.
No. He said it multiple times.
Oh my God.
I don't know how
over
many
and
times
over and over again. Oh my God.
And the screenplay was about, like mistreating Black people. I think it was sort of autobiographical ish, I believe.
Okay. Yeah.
I have to verify that. But yeah, he was writing this screenplay kind of about his life as, an LAPD, officer having to deal with, these people. And he had ties to like some right-wing extremist groups like in Idaho. And I mean, there were a lot of problems with him.
Yes.
And he lied on the stand, and then they brought him back on the stand, and they he invoked the Fifth Amendment.
Yeah, that wasn't good. That looked terrible. That was just the worst. Yeah.
And then the DNA testing this was the first time they had really used DNA that I could recall in a big case like this, but it was very sloppy, the collection of it, because it was kind of new. And so, OJ had this dream team and they really were like a dream team of multiple attorneys who each had their little area of expertise that they took. And then the two guys who now do the Innocence Project, Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld, they ripped the department apart with the sloppiness, the garbage in, garbage out. That's what that was their saying. Like, you can't trust any of this DNA evidence.
Yeah.
But that was also one of the big mysteries of the case, is that for such a brutal, two brutal murders where there's blood everywhere at the crime scene, but literally they never found any blood on OJ, and they found like drops, like literally 1 or 2 drops of blood in his Bronco, in his house. Drops.
Yeah. So because his only injury was his middle finger, right? Like they saw that, and he says that he cut it. He didn't know how. And then he dropped a glass in Chicago when he learned about Nicole, and maybe that reopened it. But yeah, because usually, right, if you're a true crime aficionado, that when stabbings, that there's a lot of wounds on someone's hands, that between the blood and the sweat and all that stuff, that the knife slips. But that he brutally murdered these two people and only had, minimal injury to his finger.
Yeah.
So that's like, huh?
Well,
You know?
Harvey Levin had a couple of theories about that.
Oh, okay.
So he thinks, so remember, AC, Al Cowlings, and OJ have the exact same car, a white Bronco.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
And it was AC's white Bronco was the freeway chase. And so he thinks that maybe OJ used AC's Bronco to go over there that night.
Oh,
and that,
interesting.
The real Bronco was somehow disposed of somewhere else. Because apparently OJ had some sort of an office or a storage unit somewhere, like right in between, equal distance from his house and Nicole's condo.
Mm-hmm.
But that would have required, I don't know, all of these theories require so much planning.
Yeah.
And to me, this seems more like a crime of passion, the brewing for many. I don't think he got up that day and you said,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
Because why would you plan this for the day when you're supposed to fly to Chicago that night and a limo driver's picking you up at 10:45?
No, I agree with you. I think that is, I think this was, and why, and it happened at night. I think that it was one of those things where, throughout the day, he just kept no dinner, no one sitting with me, right? Like boom, 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 Marcus Allen, candles by the bathtub. I mean, I think it was just, it really was. And I really do think he thought, I'm going to go before I head off to Chicago, I'm going to go by Nicole's, make sure to slash her tires. Let me see what she's doing. And then I'll go back home. I mean, he didn't expect to do what he did.
It's so weird.
Ugh.
Yeah. And the evidence. And another thing was, Cato testified about how when the limo driver came to pick him up, there were two suitcases, and I think one was a garment bag. It's this mysterious Louis Vuitton garment bag.
Mm-hmm.
And they were loading the luggage into the limo, and Cato went to go pick up that bag, and OJ's like, no, don't touch that. He takes the bag, and then when he comes back, like the next day, after being told Nicole was killed, he arrives back to Rockingham in the same Louis Vuitton bag. There's videos of this all over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
The same Louis Vuitton bag that arrived back at Rockingham with OJ was mysteriously put down on the ground and then picked up by Robert Kardashian.
Oh.
And taken, I think Kardashian takes it to his car. Never been found, never seen again.
Interesting. So is the theory that maybe Robert Kardashian helped out OJ? Or OJ said, hey, take this bag.
He had to have known.
Yeah.
Why would first of all, why would OJ just leave? Why would anyone just leave the bag there?
Mm-hmm.
And how did he know to pick it up and take it?
Yeah.
And if AC did help him with the Bronco and the switcheroo and whatever, then that would have had to be I don't know. We could go down a rabbit hole with this case. This case is fascinating. It's just.
Yeah. I mean, it is, it's possible that OJ told Al and told Robert the truth, and maybe went to them and said, I did this horrible thing. I feel terrible, but don't ruin my kids' lives. If I go to prison, my kids, and that maybe they both felt compelled to help him. They felt like, oh, okay. This is our friend. I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
But,
so another theme that I just wanted to touch upon is, because it's been 30 years, we see how people that have had these tragedies, how you deal with death. And there are moments in this documentary where Denise, she cries. I mean, it's viscerally crying, wailing as if she just learned about this, 5 minutes earlier, and how raw the sadness is. And, we've talked about death and such. I mean, I always say that you don't ever stop missing the person. You just get used to them not being around. That's how time helps you heal. But that the loss of that person, how it affects your life, how it affects everything that comes after that, what she talked about, like every family gathering, right? Every Christmas, everyone gets together for the big picture. You're constantly reminded that someone is missing here, and that intensity just never ever goes away. And it just drives me crazy when people get upset with Kim Goldman or Denise Brown because they are still out there advocating for their family members, still talking about this, still trying to get things done, still trying to get answers. And it's like, yeah, because they lost their sibling. I mean, think about your life if I was brutally murdered, 30 years ago. How that would affect the rest of your life, or vice versa. If that had happened to you, how this would affect my entire trajectory of my life. Kim Goldman was, I think in grad school or something, or in college when all this happened. I mean, it's just how nothing's ever the same.
Well, and that's why the defense had to dehumanize Nicole so people wouldn't, well, a lot was going on with this jury, but I mean, partially is to dehumanize her. Like, she was not, like, all she was like, they're trying to say she's just going out and partying with all her girlfriends, and she's doing drugs, and Faye Resnick. And at one point they were talking about how she'd had 6 abortions or something. Which I don't even know I highly doubt that's even true, but what are you talking about? Why are you saying these things? I mean, it was super, super disgusting the way that they smeared her in the tabloids, protecting our dear OJ. Again,
yes. Well, and that's why I think that. So what was I going to say? Just lost my train of thought. This happens.
Well, going back to there was a couple other points about the race issue that I wanted to make. Let me find my notes. So, the way that Johnny Cochran, who is really a brilliant lawyer, the way that he sold this to the jury, well, first of all, the prosecution made a terrible, terrible, terrible mistake by trying the case downtown. Because if they had tried the case in Santa Monica courthouse, OJ would have been guilty. I mean, those... OJ is not it's ironic because OJ is not part of the Black community in Los Angeles. Like, they are not his people. The white people on the West Side are his people.
Yeah, that's who he's hanging out with.
So he gets tried downtown, where it's the jury's predominantly people of color, and Cochran weaves in this thing about how, well, a lot of these jurors know people in their families or friends or whoever who've been framed by the police, who've been mistreated by the police. So, this happens all the time.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't it happen to OJ Simpson?
Yeah.
You don't think OJ Simpson's beyond being able to be framed by the police? And it worked. And then the whole divide over, oh my gosh, when the verdict came out, I had forgotten that Oprah had this live on her show.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I do remember where I was when the verdict came out. I do remember that. But I didn't know it was live and how divided it was. You could see right there in the audience, right? Because the audience was lots of very mixed people of color, white people, right? Like, so, and it was so clear. It was so clear.
Yeah, when they read the verdict, all the Black people in the audience were cheering, and the white people were just sitting there looking like, what just happened? And there's lots of scenes of things, but I can't believe Oprah did that live.
Yeah,
that just seemed kind of weird to me. But yeah, they totally exploited the racial divide, and I think that a lot of the jurors would probably say, yeah, this was payback. We don't really care if OJ's guilty or not. I don't think they really cared about Nicole or Ron or what happened in this case. They saw an opportunity to give it back to the LAPD, and they took it. They deliberated for 2 hours.
Yeah.
They basically filled out the forms, had lunch, and filled out the verdict forms. And then there was that juror who on the way out after the verdict was read, gave Johnny Cochran the Black Power sign.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. Well, and Kim Goldman did a podcast
Yeah. I listened
about
to
this,
that.
and she interviewed him. And I think he pretty much, from what I remember, they very much in the interview, and she interviewed a couple different jurors, said exactly that, which is this was payback. This was our chance, and I think they were also really angry too with the prosecution, the fact that they were sequestered so long and frustrated and how difficult it was.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of like this anger towards like the city, the system and the city and all of this for doing this. So, how do we fight back?
Yeah.
In some way, shape or form. But yeah.
And one other thing that has changed. So I can't remember if I mentioned this earlier, but all of Nicole's diaries and letters and all that kind of stuff was inadmissible as hearsay. And the law did change after this case to make those types of things admissible in these cases. But so it was hard for the prosecution to paint this domestic violence picture without all of that. Because what did they have? They had one time where he pleaded no contest. They had some pictures of her. They had Denise Brown was allowed to testify as to what she personally witnessed because she was there, but she was the only one who ever saw anything.
Yeah.
So, and she's a biased witness. They couldn't get in any, unbiased information.
Yeah, and it was interesting because they talk about how they ended up finding her safe deposit box, and in the safe deposit box are her diary entries and these pictures. And I remember someone saying like, "Well, why would you have all that stuff there?" And I'm thinking to myself, this is exactly what women do when domestic violence. These women who are saying this man is going to kill me is. She put that in the safest place she could,
right?
And this was her, what they were saying in the documentary. It's Nicole speaking from the grave, but it's true. It's like, what else was she going to do with this stuff? She just handed you everything right there. Here are the pictures. Here are the diary entries. Here's everything, right? Right in front of you. I've said all these, I've said these things.
Yeah,
and
you have to protect that.
And that's why I was so confused about the timeline of things, which is because the media made it seem like she had spent all these years out partying and doing all this stuff. And
he was over her. Why would he go and kill her now?
Yeah.
He was over her. They'd been divorced for years.
But there's no one to testify regarding, the screaming match at Starbucks. I mean, that would be, there was no one to witness that. I mean, the fact that he was in the bushes, the fact that he was, around, and the fact that didn't come out.
Well, I think kind of seems to me like the prosecution had a hard time getting people to cooperate with them. Because who's gonna, all these people, they're loyal to OJ.
Yeah.
The people who witnessed the worst of this stuff are loyal to OJ, or they were the police and they were supposed to protect her. So they had a uphill climb on this case, and they thought that they just had this in the bag. They thought that this jury was just going to get exactly what. I mean, they didn't do a bang up job.
Yeah. Well, and also maybe that's human nature too, is when people are trying to force something down your throat, there is that part of us that's like, oh, F you. Then I'm going to say no. Stop. Like, don't tell me how to think or how to feel, or don't think that you think you're better than me or think that you're smarter than me.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's easy to get that
But I think you're right about the fact that they were so caught up in the timeline of like the night of the murder, like at 10:05, OJ leaves his house to go to Burger King with Kato or whatever. I mean, they had, and the limo driver, and then this and then that. Really, the real timeline that was really important was the Nicole OJ timeline and what had been happening in their relationship right up until that night.
Yeah.
If they had focused on that, and they had somehow been able to get more, I don't know. That's the nature of domestic violence. It happens in secret and behind closed doors. So of course you're not going to have. Oh, another thing, Harvey Levin said there was a man who he and his wife were friends with Nicole and OJ, and they would party together and that kind of stuff. And so twice, and this guy was ready to testify, twice Nicole had come to his house like in the middle of the night saying that OJ had beat her and she was afraid. And the judge wouldn't let him testify. So like there, every time, the either side, when they want to introduce something before a trial, it's called a motion in limine. It's something that's going to come up. So you want to get it resolved before the trial. So you make all these motions in limine saying, okay, we want to admit these journals, this testimony of this person, of that person, of all the evidence. And then the judge decides what's going to come in or not. Because if the jury hears something that is prejudicial, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, even if it gets objected to, the jury still hears it. So you want to make sure the jury never hears it. And that's what they did. They brought all these motions and the defense was just killing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were killing it on these motions.
Well, and one other thing too was just, I think, obviously entertainment and the fact that this was what everyone talked about. There was the dancing Itos on Jay Leno on The Tonight Show. We saw clips in this documentary of Saturday Night Live covering the case. And it was, I think that was also part of it too, was it really was made out to be a bit of a joke, a bit of this farce of this thing that you're watching. And I definitely don't think that if this was happening today, this is not how it would be handled in the media. And that's another thing that's changed a lot is the media. And I'm not saying that the media has gotten tremendously better, but I do think that there is a lot more awareness and respect.
Yeah. It's not cool to make fun of victims.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, and in some ways, yeah, it's almost kind of like what is acceptable in our society. And back then it was acceptable. It was okay to do that. It was okay to think that way. I mean, all of this stuff that they were laying down on Nicole being like, oh, she did coke and she did this. And it's like, yeah, she's probably doing coke with OJ. Yeah, and Robert Kardashian and Kris Kardashian and Frey Resnick.
Who do you think's paying for this coke?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit, and like, what if every person who did coke deserved to get murdered? Like, are you kidding me? But it was very much the way in which they really had they were able to spin it so easily. There was nobody that was standing up except for the families, really.
They were
anything.
They were the only thing that was a reminder, sitting there every day in this courtroom that this is real. This is a real person. It was a circus. It was really a circus. I don't think there's been a trial since that's been quite that awful. It really was. But then I love this. After the verdict, everyone hates OJ now.
Yes, yes.
He can't get into any good restaurants.
Nobody wants him out at the parties.
No. He's because again, these people they never really were his they never really were his friends to begin with, obviously. So he moves to Florida. And also because the laws in Florida allowed him to first there was the civil trial.
Yes.
He was found liable and they got like a $30 million judgment. Well, one of the reasons he went to Florida was because Florida has better protections for asset protection. So if you have a judgment against you, he's got this $30 million judgment against him. So they can start going after his property and his assets, whatever. Well, one of his biggest assets was he had this NFL pension. And in Florida, that's untouchable. Creditors can't get your pension. So he moves to Florida with Sydney and Justin. They had a custody trial or a custody dispute because they had been living with Nicole's parents all this time. And
this was another thing that put the Browns and many families in a really terrible position is that when you have one spouse that murders the other spouse, right? The people that really lose out are the grandparents, the aunts and uncles. Like they all had these relationships. And I think that was the other thing. I think Nicole's parents also were very scared of upsetting OJ because they knew they needed him if they wanted to see the kids. Yeah.
Yeah, when they had, because, and he won in custody in family court, because he had been acquitted. Although they did argue that, although he'd only been convicted of a small, when he pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor, that he had a history of domestic violence, but it was a long time. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, and he was acquitted, so he is innocent, right?
Right. Well, not innocent, but he's not. Yeah. He's not convicted of anything. But so he won, and they I think they just kind of stopped at some point. They didn't appeal it, and apparently the kids wanted to go. And it was funny because they knew that he had killed their mother, but yet they still wanted to be with him.
Yeah, but that's how it always is, right? Yeah. I mean, people always want the approval and love of their parents, no matter what's happened. It's still their father, and But and then we learn, right? Like OJ before he was locked up for the thing that happened in Las Vegas. Was this like he was taking MDMA and he was raided by the FBI? I mean, he was doing a lot of shady crap. I'm sure he was been doing shady stuff for decades prior to all of this. But it sounds like he got to Florida and he was just in between looking for the real killer and golfing. Yeah. He was doing ecstasy and doing a lot of drugs or something was going on, or partying. Well, I think he's always partied a lot.
Yeah. Denise said that Nicole told her that he was a cocaine addict. And so, he was hanging out with this guy who was an ecstasy dealer and other drugs, cocaine. So, the FBI raided his house. They didn't find anything. I think he was tipped off. But he was good friends with this guy who was a drug smuggler. And I think OJ, in exchange for drugs, I don't know, probably helped hook him up with people somehow. But the police, what did they say? The police were called while the kids are living there with him in Florida. The police were called to that home like 17 times. Ugh. And a lot of the calls were anonymous. Like the person didn't even want to identify themselves. And so they had quite, and it sounds like during this time, sadly, like they kind of lost the relationship with the Brown family, and they didn't really, because Denise was such a public person. Anytime Denise would talk about the kids or talk about the case, somehow the kids would end up, the paparazzi and media would come around. They didn't want that attention. So she just stopped talking about them. Yeah. Out of respect, to try to, not bring them any more stress. But it sounds like there was a real rift with several family members, and I don't know.
Well, and this is what Denise was talking about, like how this one person, this one incident, like ruins the lives, right? So now the grandparents don't have a relationship with their grandchildren, and nobody has these relationships anymore, and it just goes on and on and on.
But once they turned 18, obviously they could do whatever they want, but I don't really think they did. I think that the grandparents might have been dead. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, it looked like the mom, Judy, she died in 2020. So she's been around for a bit, but the father, I think, passed away in like 2014 or something. I'd have to look that up, but they were around for a bit, but you lose your daughter, and then now you lost your grandchildren too.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they just felt so powerless over this.
Yeah. So. And of course, OJ did get convicted, and this really was a revenge conviction, which was overblown. Because basically he's in Las Vegas. He claims that someone stole a bunch of memorabilia from him. football memorabilia and stuff he was trying to sell. And he broke into some hotel room to try to get it back. And apparently there was a gun. And they charged him with kidnapping because he told the person to move from one room to the next, which technically can be kidnapping. But anyway, they gave him 33 years and eligible for parole after 9. As soon as he hit 9 years, they just let him go because it was excessive. I mean, and just because he got away with killing 2 people doesn't mean you just can translate that over to some other crime.
Well, and this, of course, makes a big comment about our justice system, right? Here are two cases involving the same person where neither one was just, like, right? We're reacting to this other thing. So we're going to, penalize him even harsher. I mean, it just, all of it just shows you how the system, it's broken in a lot of ways. And that, I think it's human nature. I think you can't get away from the fact that if it's peers judging other peers, that it's people talking about other people, that it's always, the system is always going to be flawed in some way, shape, or form because we're flawed. And it's really hard for people to get justice, and I think this is again why people are so fascinated by the Karen Reed case and some of these other cases, that this feeling of who can we trust?
Yeah.
It's hard to trust.
You get different treatment.
Yep.
Depending on who you are.
And what the situation is and who the other person is.
Who the victim is. Yeah. It's all.
Yeah. Because if you take the celebrity of OJ, if you take all of that stuff and just sort of strip it away at its very basic thing, this was, the most effed up situation ever of someone being harassed and stalked by a partner and beaten, and that partner never gets punished at all, and then murders them and still isn't punished. And then we, with the Las Vegas thing, this is how we react. Listen, I don't feel bad, but I mean, at the same time, it's still not right to eye for an eye leaves everyone blind. Yeah.
One has nothing to do with the other.
Anywho, so I recommend the documentary. I thought it was really good.
Like I said, this is the first time that I learned, and I've been obsessed with this case since day one. And I was reminded of a lot of things. I learned a lot of new things. I learned, more about Nicole's life. So if you're obsessed with these kind of cases, you'll love it.
One. Yeah.
It is.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. Just a few announcements. If you enjoy us and enjoy what we have to say, go check out our Patreon, patreon.com/psychlegalpop. Other ways to support us is to subscribe to the podcast or leave us a 5-star rating and review. We'd really appreciate it. All those things do help us. And I think that's it. Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
See you next time.
All right. Bye.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love, with no artificial sweeteners, only 30 calories, just 5 grams of sugar, and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. That great Pepsi taste with even more to love. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.